So this is presentation number 2. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, you should see here, reducing project costs and working best with your team. So it's so important. This is, even though we have, sales folks on here, business development folks with the grant writing and the RFP, all of this is all related. Once we start the process of sales and pricing, it starts all the way from the salesperson and it hits all the way to the end to reducing project costs and what's going on in the project. The deliverables ultimately have to be priced right. We got to make sure that we're making a profit. And then we also have to make sure that our personnel cost is reasonable to make sure that all the pieces, and these can be very variable at the time. Also with grant writing and RFPs, if it's a project, you can go over budget and really get hot with a government contract because they really lowball the pricing. And so they don't necessarily go for the top pricing. They want top work, but sometimes they don't go toward the top pricing. And so sometimes we have to be very, very cautious about what we say we're going to do. And if it's not concise within the write-up for a grant or for a project, for the RFP, the request for proposal for a government contract. So it's very important. All of these pieces work together, but going into presentation number 2, this is a little shorter than the other presentation on the pipeline, the contract, and the project charter. All right, reducing project costs and working best with your team. So essentially, I like to say 3 components is a project, right? You would think it would be personnel, right? No, it's not. It's not your team. It's the scope. That means what is the requirements of the project? What is the description of the project? And what did we say we were going to do in the contract? What did they request in the RFP? What did they request in the grant proposal, right? That's the scope, the actual deliverable pieces, the requirements of the project. Timeline. Timeline is from the start to the end, okay? There might be tasks or milestones throughout the timeline of the project, right? And the project timeline could vary throughout the project, but you always want to hit the end within that scope of the project at a certain time and begin starting the project. All right. You can accelerate, you can change, but we kind of want to predict what the milestones are and the task to make sure that we end up with an on-time project. Budget. All these are variables. If the scope isn't right, then it messes up the timeline. If the timeline is messed up because somebody took some longer time or what have you on the project, it can mess up the scope because the quality of work could go. You can't get all the deliverables that you want. And then ultimately, it can hurt the budget. Because if it takes too long, all right, that means that somebody could not be working. That means we're losing overhead costs for administrative fees of the project, right? That you're at a standstill. Client says, I'm going on vacation. Well, we got a whole team that's just sitting there. We got other projects need to go, and then we're not hitting where we need to go. So the budget can be messed up by all of these variables. So I did want to show a video about scope creep. I'm sure you've all heard of scope creep, but I want all of you to learn about a little bit about the scope creep and how it has messed up some of our projects. It has made our projects longer because of this little creep that comes in to the scope, and the client is going to push whatever they can. Well, we said we wanted 5 modules, but can we get 10? Well, that wasn't what we timelined in the budget. Well, maybe you can get 10, but we may have to add more resources. But change, the budget's going to change. But let's hear a video about scope creep. So I'm going to just stop here, and I'm going to share my screen again, and going to listen to this guy talk about, you know, some pieces of scope creep.
This is Jason Long, and today we're going to define scope creep. A lot of people have asked me about this over the years, and especially over this past year. And I wanted to give a clear definition of scope creep. Scope creep is an uncontrolled growth in the scope of your project. And the way this happens is if you don't have a clearly defined scope of work to begin with, then people don't know where's the start, where's the finish, what are you doing, what are you not doing, what are you responsible for, what are you not responsible for. And scope gets creeped, or it grows, by the client asking for more and more and more and more stuff. So they're building onto the scope of the project from what you initially planned. And what happens is that this increases your time, it decreases your profit, it increases the cost, whether it's the cost to you or the cost to the client, hopefully in your case to the client, but it can go either way, and it increases the overall timeline of the project. And sometimes projects will have so much scope creep that they just won't get done. That you'll build this giant behemoth thing that just never gets finished, and whoever's in charge just finally cancels the project because it's growing out of control. And so this all comes about by having a poorly defined scope of work from the beginning and having poor project management as you go along. So the way to avoid this, obviously, is to have really good scope of work to begin with and good project management as you go along, such that every time a new feature or new system or whatever is added to the system, to the project, you add this into the scope and you account for the new amount of time, the new cost, pass that cost along, and you make sure that the client knows where they stand within the project. When projects don't have a good scope of work, they almost always end up with scope creep. So don't let this happen to you. Scope your projects so you don't have scope creep, don't have mismanaged expectations, you don't have upset clients, and you make money. That's all you gotta do.
All right, so we talked a little bit about the scope creep and just going back to the PowerPoint presentation. But we have hit where it's maybe not the scope, but yeah, it is the scope because the timeline messed up and the project was scoped for a certain amount of time, and then it messed up the timeline, and then we went over, okay? Or something happened within the project where there had to be an amendment or an addendum, and so the scope changed, then the timeline changed, which is fine. But as long as we're not incurring the cost, that we're letting the client know and understanding. But also it's very important as a sales or business development team, as you're writing the RFP or you're replying to a grant or a proposal, or you're doing a contract with, and you're talking to whomever, a client, a salesperson, you're talking to the client, that you're very specific about what the capacity is and what we can do and what level of e-learning we're providing. And sometimes, you know, before we even get to the project, it's already messed up in the beginning. Well, did we talk to, you know, maybe we needed to talk to the project manager to say, okay, well, can this be done on the website? Or if it doesn't, maybe we need to talk to the client about it beforehand, but there needs to be some cross collaboration with everyone to make sure that the scope is right for a project and that we can meet the capabilities of the project. And it's also defined and everybody is clear, from the client to your team, from the salespeople to who people is writing the RFP and the contract. All right, so it's really, really important that all of those pieces work together. Some problems and solutions to reducing project costs. Scope creep is a big thing, but one of the solutions is defining the project scope. That's why we do the contract. We try to make it as descriptive as possible. We make sure we have the deliverables and detail, the timeline, the sign off. We even tell how we monitor the process, the phases that we go through. Also, we do check-in meetings with the client as well as the team, and we'll provide a burn sheet. And that's how we keep that scope creep out and make sure that we're not hitting those variables, or we're very clear, okay, if the scope changes, the timeline and the budget. And so that's how we're keeping from the monitoring of all of that through check-in meetings, through the burn sheet. That's why everybody has to turn in their burn sheet on time. We're always looking at the burn sheet. The chief, Maurice, the chief financial officer, is always looking at the burn sheets. And he also says, well, why is this taking so much time? I don't know, why is this taking so long? It didn't take that long time for the prototype. But we have to also make sure that we're staying within the level and the scope of the project when it's delivered. Blowing the budget. Creating a list of project tasks with the estimated time it will take. So blowing the budget means we just creating all kind of stuff. We just love it. We want to create it because we accept it, because this is our passion. But we can't write anything. You know, we have to make sure that we adhere to the contract, the level of e-learning solutions that we are providing, and we are creating a list of project tasks that will be helpful. We do, the project managers do have a template where they list the tasks that's outside the project charter that they can estimate. Well, how long will it take you, the writer? And, you know, some of you writers might be like, I don't know. Or some of the people in the project might instruct, I don't know. You know, how long it's going to take. But it's very important that, okay, we're using our calculator sheet, but we're also talking, because there are variables, because people are people, but how are we estimating the time to make sure from the contract to the RFP to the grant, all the way to the project charter. Project delays. One can be an issue from the client to even us, okay, as far as the team. And estimating the time it needs to take a task. Building in some time. You always want to talk to the client like a sense of urgency, like this needs to be done today, but even though you may put a 2-day pad in it, you know, but contingency time, manage multiple project times by creating a Gantt chart. Monday.com does do a Gantt chart if you have multiple pieces that are going overlapping at the same time. Not enough resources. I'm always giving a writer. Sometimes it's great to use one writer because it's just cohesive writing, but sometimes you got to pull in other people to make the project resource, and the project manager and the project team, you can't be offended somebody else coming in, but they need to help because it's taking too long and we need to move a little bit faster, and we have to allocate a plan to bring in more resources if there's not enough. Lack of clarity. Continually double check all project requirements during the planning stages and create statement of work, charter, and continually review the team and client. So lack of clarity. The charter helps with that, with the team, the kickoff meeting, internal kickoff meeting with the team, and the and the kickoff meeting with the client is very helpful, and those check-in meetings. Client issues. Woo! I know some of you've had some clients from hell, right? But you've also had some clients that are very sweet and wonderful. But we treat all of our clients with the utmost respect, which is very, very important, no matter what's going on, because we don't know, they might be busy, what's going on, but we want to try to provide them the utmost satisfaction. So we need to be clear up front and ensure requirements are agreed upon prior to the beginning of work. Create a project communication plan so everybody is knowledgeable about when meetings are, how long meetings are going to be, that we're not over meeting, that, you know, the duration of the project is good, and that we're making sure that the meetings are productive. you know, that we're not talking about the weather, that we have an agenda, that we're providing minutes for both the internal and the internal as well, the internal team meeting as well as the client meeting. Strategic partners, team delays, and inexperienced workers. Now, we hire subcontractors or strategic partners all the time. All right. Some of them may not come with as much experience as others, but how do you mitigate that? Doesn't mean we're going to let those people go, because they want to do the work, they want to learn, and we're going to give them a project to do it. We want to accurately estimate the resources needed, understand the project requirements, communicate expected workload early, encourage team to communicate delays early, use synchronous communication channels, be patient with each other. Everybody's coming with different skills. You may be better and it's a team. Work together. Put experienced team members with less experienced team members. Maybe set up a one-on-one meeting with the inexperienced team members. Even some of the experienced team members may need some support, or they need to be reminded of some things. Use the intranet that we've created with some templates, can understand the context of the project, provide one-on-one training from the start of the project. Poor risk management. You need to identify risk. There's been projects where we have not done a really good job of identifying risk. Like if we need to put something on a website or a learning management system, we need to find out what are the requirements before we start building anything, to make sure we are very clear. Does this go on the website? Will this go with the client? So they are very clear about what is going on at the very onset. So there should be some type of check prior to, and these are risks that can be mitigated. Do a thorough risk assessment, establish a solid risk management process, explain the risk to the client and how it would be handled. Okay, so there might be a risk, but this is how, if something does happen, but this is beforehand, this is how we will handle it. We're going to let you know, we're going to assess the issue, and then we're going to come to you maybe with an addendum, or how we could basically be within the budget, or this is outside the budget, this is outside the timeline, or outside the scope of the work. Working best with your team. We've done a lot of teamwork. I'm not going to go really in depth with this, but I think it's really important that establishing a common goal, set up a workflow with the project. Looks like my workflow with the team. Identify strengths. Be an example. Use Monday, Slack, Google, the intranet. Encourage honesty. Be honest with each other, but be friendly and respectful. Cross collaboration is key. Encourage it. Okay, so these are just some of the things I think that you could use to help with your cross collaborative team, with your team, project teams, to help make them work better and more efficiently. Thank you so much for listening to the second presentation. Got one more to go. Take care.